Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the voice of Detroit. Hey, we're here live. It's Sunday, May 28th, 2017, day before Memorial Day, and we're live. Be sure to visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can sign up for, we're doing a special session of my online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We're doing a special session of that on Memorial Day, and we'll do something with the history of Memorial Day there as well. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, sign up for that. Tomorrow's session is only $10, okay? And all the sessions are recorded, so if you sign up for it, if you miss any of the class, you can go back and watch it over and over again, and we'll have that on digital download also, because the other courses I put on digital download. All right, so we know that the last Monday in May is known as Memorial Day, okay? And there are African American roots to Memorial Day, but a lot of people don't know this, all right? And this information came out in 2011, if I remember correctly, around 2011, information about the African American roots of Memorial Day came out. So on Memorial Day, you know, we honor those in the military who lost their lives while in the military. And it also marks the unofficial start of summer, and is celebrated by cookouts, 3-day weekends, etc. All right, and we know that you have the Uniform Monday Holiday Act that was passed by Congress in 1968, which made Memorial Day an official federal holiday. It became an official federal holiday in 1971, but Congress passed that act in 1968. All right. What many people don't know is that Memorial Day has African American origins. Okay. Going back to the end of the Civil War. All right. Now, David W. Blight teaches American history at Yale University, where he is the director of the Gilder Lerman Center for the Study of Slavery, okay, for the study of slavery resistance and abolition. He's the author of the Bancroft Prize-winning book, Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory, and the forthcoming A Slave No More, Two Men Who Escaped to Freedom, including their narratives of emancipation. So if we do a quick recap of the Civil War, we know that it started spring of 1861. Rather than accepting President Abraham Lincoln's leadership, you're going to have 7 states that succeed from the Union, led by South Carolina, and also comprising of Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. Okay, they elected to succeed from the Union and form the Confederate States of America, CSA, Confederate States of America, in February of 1861. All right. Now, the Confederacy elected Mexican War hero and former Secretary of War Jefferson Davis as their president, and began organizing an independent government modeled on the U.S. Constitution, with caveats guaranteeing slavery. Now, on April 12th, the Confederacy began fighting to assert its independence when Confederate troops fired on Fort Sumter in the Charleston, South Carolina harbor. Now, soon after this, the states of Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia are going to join the Confederacy as well. So you're going to have 2.4 million people approximately that served in the Civil War. You're going to have 620,000 soldiers who were killed. That 2.4 million includes approximately 186,000 African American soldiers who served in the Civil War as well. All right. Now, something of an anticlimax, General Joseph E. Johnston handed over the last Confederate army to General Sherman near Durham, North Carolina on April 26, 1865. Now, on May 1st, 1865, now the Civil War is going to officially end June 2nd, 1865, and History.com has an article about that. June 2nd, 1865, the official end of the Civil War. On May 1st, 1865, freed slaves gathered in Charleston, South Carolina to commemorate the death of Union soldiers and the end of the American Civil War. Now, 3 years later, General John Logan issued a special order that May 30th, 1868 be observed as Decoration Day. Decoration Day, May 30th, 1868. And this was what would become known as the first Memorial Day. And this was a day set aside, quote, for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorative or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet, churchyard in the land, end quote. Okay, so originally, Decoration Day was to celebrate just those who died, who served in the Civil War and died in the Civil War. All right. Now, you're going to have thousands of African-American Charlestonians, most of them former slaves, who remained in the city and conducted a series of commemorations to declare their sense of the meaning of the war. All right. Now, the largest of these events, and unknown until some extraordinary luck on the part of David W. Blight in his research, took place on May 1st, 1865. During the final year of this was during the final year of the Civil War. All right, the Confederates had converted the Planters Horse Track, which was the Washington Race Course and Jockey Club, into an outdoor prison. We know horse racing was big. I talked about it before on Steve Hood's show. Can't remember. I talked about it here on this show because African Americans used to dominate horse racing, and a lot of your early winners of the Kentucky Derby were African American men. Okay, Oliver Lewis was the first winner of the Kentucky Derby in 1875. He was a former slave. Okay, so you're going to see that even during slavery, African Americans are going to dominate horse racing, but we're going to be pushed out of it for a few reasons. One of them was unionization. Okay, now, so they're going to convert. So you're going to have the Confederacy convert this horse track into an outdoor prison. All right. Now, Union soldiers were kept in horrible conditions in the interior of this horse track. At least 257 of them died of exposure and disease and were hastily buried in a mass grave behind the grandstand. Now, some 28 African-American workmen went to the site, reburied the Union dead soldiers properly, and built a high fence around the cemetery. They whitewashed the fence and built an archway over an entrance on which they inscribed the words, "Martyrs of the Race Course." Martyrs of the Race Course. Because keep in mind, the southern states are trying to keep slavery intact. So when you have the Union troops coming through and fighting, okay, they're fighting to bring the South back into the Union, and they're going to subsequently free the slaves. All right, so those who are enslaved are looking at the Union troops basically as heroes, because you freeing us from these people who separated from the country to keep us enslaved. Now, black Charlestonians, in cooperation with white missionaries and teachers, staged an unforgettable parade of 10,000 people on the slaveholders' race course. 10,000 people on the slaveholders' race course. The symbolic power of the low country planter aristocracy's horse track, where they had displayed their wealth, leisure, and influence, was not lost on the freed people, these formerly enslaved African people. A New York Tribune correspondent witnessed the event, describing, quote, "a procession of friends and mourners as South Carolina and the United States never saw before," end quote. So when we look at the evolution of Memorial Day, we see that Memorial Day as Decoration Day originally, going back to 1868, gradually came to be known. It gradually becomes known as Memorial Day, but it started out as Decoration Day. It originally honored only those who lost their lives fighting in the Civil War. But during World War One, the United States found itself embroiled in another major conflicts of 1914 and 1918, World War One. Okay, the U.S. found itself embroiled in another major conflict, and the holiday evolved to commemorate American military personnel who died in all of the wars. Now, for decades, Memorial Day continued to be observed on May 30th as the original date set by General Logan, okay, for the first Decoration Day, okay, going back to 1868, May 30th, 1868. But in 1968, which is 100 years after the first Decoration Day was celebrated. In 1968, the U.S. Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act. The Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which established Memorial Day as the last Monday in May in order to create a 3-day weekend for federal employees. And this change went into effect in 1971. So this Uniform Monday Holiday Act, you're going to have other holidays named as federal holidays to give more 3-day weekends for federal employees. And this was one of them, Memorial Day. So the same law also declared Memorial Day the federal holiday. Some Memorial Day traditions in cities, towns across the United States, they host Memorial Day parades each year, often incorporating military personnel and members of veterans organizations. Some of the largest parades take place in Chicago, New York, and Washington, D.C. Americans also observe Memorial Day by visiting cemeteries and memorials. On a less somber note, many people throw parties and barbecues on this holiday, perhaps because it officially marks the beginning of summer. Okay, so for more information on this, Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. has an article from 2014 from theroot.com, The Black Roots of Memorial Day, The Black Roots of Memorial Day, May 26, 2014. Janae Desmond Harris had an original article going back to May 27, 2011. I think that's how I first found out about this. Memorial Day, blacks were first to celebrate, scholar says. Memorial Day, blacks were first to celebrate, scholar says. This was from theroot.com, also May 27, 2011. And then also history.com has a good article, Memorial Day. History.com, official website of the History Channel. Okay, so we know that May 19th was the anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X, okay, formerly known as Malcolm Little. And we know that Malcolm lived in Michigan for a period of time also, all right? So Malcolm X was born, Malcolm Little, on May 19, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. His mother's name was Louise Norton Little, and she was a homemaker. She occupied the house with her family's 8 children. His father's name was Earl Little, and Earl Little was an outspoken Baptist minister and an avid supporter of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association. Okay, Universal Negro Improvement Association. So Earl Little's civil rights activism prompted death threats from white supremacists and a white supremacist organization called the Black Legion. That's a kind of a Ku Klux Klan type organization. You're going to have the Fraternal Order of the Ku Klux Klan, founded December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee. Some sources will say 1826, but most sources say December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee. And actually, if you go to history.com, they have a good article there about the Ku Klux Klan as well. Okay, now, but you're going to have other white supremacist organizations that are similar to the Ku Klux Klan. The Black Legion was one of them. All right. So the Black Legion is going to force Malcolm's family to relocate twice before Malcolm's 4th birthday. Now, regardless of the Littles' efforts to elude the Black Legion, in 1929, their Lansing, Michigan home was burned to the ground. 2 years later, Earl Little's body was found lying across the town's trolley tracks. Now, police ruled both incidents as accidents, but the Littles were certain that members of the Black Legion were responsible. Now, Louise Little, Malcolm's mother, suffered an emotional breakdown several years after the death of her husband and was committed to a mental institution. That was in Kalamazoo, Michigan, while her children were split up among various foster homes and orphanages. Eventually, Malcolm Little and his longtime friend Malcolm Shorty Jarvis moved back to Boston. Now, in 1946, they were arrested and convicted of burglary charges, and Malcolm Little was sentenced to 10 years in prison, although he was granted parole after serving 7 years. Recalling his days in school, he used that time to further his education. Even he started taking courses in prison even before he was introduced to the Nation of Islam by his siblings. There was a older black male prisoner named John Bembry, if I remember correctly, John Bembry, who told him to, educate yourself while you're here in prison, utilize this time wisely. So he was taking classes even before he was introduced to the Nation of Islam. Okay, now it's going to be while he's in prison during this period of time of self-enlightenment that Malcolm's brother Reginald would visit and discuss his recent conversion to the Muslim religion. And Reginald belonged to the religious organization known as the Nation of Islam. Okay, now Malcolm was intrigued by this and began to study the teachings of Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad. Now Elijah Muhammad taught that white society actively worked to keep African Americans from empowering themselves and achieving political, economic, and social success. Among other goals, the NOI fought for a state of their own, separate from one inhabited by white people. But by the time Malcolm was paroled in 1952, Malcolm was a devoted follower with the new surname of X. Okay, Malcolm X. He considered Little to be a slave name and chose X to signify his lost tribal name. Okay, that's taken away from the slave masters. Now, Malcolm was intelligent and articulate, as we know, and Malcolm was appointed as a minister and national spokesman for the Nation of Islam. And Elijah Muhammad also charged him with establishing new mosques in cities such as Detroit, Michigan, okay, where the Nation of Islam officially started, and Harlem, New York. Malcolm utilized newspaper columns in Muhammad Speaks as well as radio and television to communicate the NOI's message across the United States. His charisma, drive, and conviction attracted an astounding number of new members, and Malcolm was largely credited with increasing membership in the Nation of Islam from approximately 500 in 1952 to 30,000 in 1963. Okay, I just want to play a quick excerpt here of Malcolm X because we run out of time. Let's go to this clip here. And Malcolm X is talking about history, not hatred.
Counterpart of all those things you just mentioned, the white people who were guilty of white supremacy try and hide their own guilt by accusing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad of teaching black supremacy when he tries to uplift the mentality, the social, mental, economic condition of black people in this country. And Jews who have been guilty of exploiting the black people in this country economically, civically, and otherwise hide their guilt by accusing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad of teaching, of being anti-Semitic, simply because he teaches our people to go into business for ourselves and try and take over the economic leadership in our own community. And this other thing, white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and what was the other?
And hatred.
And hatred. And since the white people collectively have practiced the worst form of hatred against Negroes in this country, and they know that they are guilty of it, now when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad comes along and begins to list the historic deeds, the historic attitude, the historic behavior of the white man in this country toward the black people in this country, again, the white people are so guilty that they can't stop doing these things to make Mr. Muhammad appear wrong, so they hide their wrong by saying that he is teaching hatred. History is not hatred.
Okay, put it back. All right, so that's a clip of Malcolm. We'll talk some more about this next week. Hey, be sure to register for my online class I'm teaching on Monday, May 29th on Memorial Day, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We're doing session number 4 of Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Thanks for tuning in to the African History Network show tonight. This is Michael Imhotep. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.